Sergeant Emily Carter stepped out of the military vehicle, her boots crunching against the gravel as she surveyed the small outpost on the edge of town. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the dusty grounds. She adjusted the strap of her bag slung across her shoulder and took a deep breath. This was her new assignment, a quiet post far from the chaos of war zones, but no less important. Her job: to train and handle two elite military working dogs, Max and Lucia, who were known for their speed, intelligence, and unwavering loyalty. Emily wasn't just any handler. She had earned her place through hard work and determination. Growing up in a family that valued discipline, she'd always been drawn to challenges others thought impossible. But being one of the few women in her field came with its own set of hurdles. While some respected her skills, many doubted her abilities simply because of her gender. Still, Emily didn't let it bother her. She knew how to prove herself, not with words, but with actions. Max, a sleek German shepherd with piercing eyes, trotted beside her, his tail wagging slightly at the familiar scent of his handler. Behind him followed Luna, a Belgian Malinois with an athletic build and alert expression. Both dogs were highly trained, capable of detecting explosives, tracking targets, and even taking down threats when necessary. Together, they formed a team that could rival any soldier. Yet, despite their reputation, Emily often found herself having to defend not only her role, but also the value of her canine partners. The locals weren't thrilled about the presence of soldiers in their peaceful town either. Most kept their distance, going about their lives without much interaction. But there was one group that stood out: the Iron Vipers, a biker gang notorious for causing trouble. They roared through the streets on their motorcycles, leather jackets emblazoned with patches that screamed rebellion. Their leader, Razor, was a burly man with a scar running down his cheek and an attitude to match. He made it clear from day one that he didn't approve of outsiders, especially someone like Emily. It all started innocently enough. One afternoon, while walking Max and Luna near the outskirts of town, Emily crossed paths with a couple of bikers loitering outside a mechanic shop. At first, they barely noticed her, too busy laughing and sharing stories. But when Max let out a playful bark, heads turned. "Look what we've got here," one of them sneered, nudging his friend. "A little lady playing soldier." Emily ignored them, keeping her focus on her dogs. She didn't have time for distractions. But the bikers weren't done. "What's this? You bring your puppies to fight your battles." Another chimed in, earning chuckles from the rest. Her jaw tightened, but she forced herself to stay calm. Engaging wouldn't solve anything. Instead, she gave Max and Luna a gentle command, and the trio continued on their way. As they walked away, she could hear the bikers mocking her under their breath. "Probably can't even fire a gun," one said loudly enough for her to hear. Though their words stung, Emily refused to let them get to her. She reminded herself why she was here: to serve her country and make a difference. And besides, she thought with a small smile, those so-called puppies could do things most people couldn't even imagine. If only the bikers knew what Max and Luna were truly capable of, maybe they'd think twice before laughing. For now, though, Emily would keep proving herself, not for them, but for herself and her loyal companions. A few days after her encounter with the bikers, Emily decided to take a break from training and headed into town. The small diner on Main Street was a favorite spot for locals, offering hot coffee and hearty meals. It was also one of the few places where she could relax, even if just for a little while. Max and Luna were by her side as always, their presence both comforting and reassuring. Though they weren't officially on duty, Emily never went anywhere without them. They were more than just working dogs. They were her partners, her family. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, drawing a few glances from the patrons inside. Most people didn't pay much attention to her anymore, used to seeing the soldier with her dogs around town. But today, things felt different. Sitting at a corner table near the window were 3 members of the Iron Vipers, their loud laughter filling the room. Razor wasn't among them, but his absence didn't make the atmosphere any less tense. One of the men noticed Emily immediately and nudged his friends, nodding toward her. "Well, well, look who decided to grace us with her presence," one of them called out, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "It's the dog lady." His comment earned chuckles from his buddies, and soon all eyes in the diner were on Emily. She paused for a moment, then continued walking to the counter, pretending not to hear. Max and Luna stayed close, their ears perked up, sensing the shift in energy. "Hey, don't ignore us," another biker shouted, leaning back in his chair. "We're just curious. What exactly do those mutts do? Fetch sticks. Roll over for treats." His tone was mocking, clearly meant to provoke a reaction. A few other customers snickered nervously, unsure whether to laugh along or stay quiet. Emily ordered her food without responding, keeping her expression neutral. She knew better than to rise to the bait. Arguing wouldn't solve anything, and besides, she had nothing to prove to these men. But the bikers weren't done. As she waited for her meal, one of them stood up and approached her, towering over her slight frame. He crossed his arms and smirked. "Come on, soldier girl, entertain us. Show us what your dogs are good for." His breath smelled of stale beer, and his stance was deliberately intimidating. Max growled softly, a low rumble that made the man take a step back. Emily placed a calming hand on Max's head, silently signaling him to stand down. "You really want to know what they're capable of?" she finally replied, her voice calm but firm. The biker blinked, caught off guard by her composure. Before he could respond, she added, "Maybe someday you'll find out. Until then, why don't you focus on something useful?" Her words hung in the air, silencing the group momentarily. Then, with a dismissive laugh, the man returned to his seat, muttering something under his breath. Emily grabbed her food and found a quiet corner to sit, far from the bikers. Max and Luna settled beside her, their watchful eyes scanning the room. Despite the tension, Emily focused on her meal, refusing to let the confrontation ruin her day. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wouldn't be the last time she'd have to deal with the iron vipers. Their taunts lingered in her mind, not because they hurt her pride, but because they underestimated her dogs, and that was something Emily couldn't ignore. As she ate, she glanced at Max and Luna, admiration swelling in her chest. These animals weren't just pets, they were highly trained professionals who could hold their own in any situation. And if the bikers ever pushed too far, Emily knew her dogs would be ready to show them exactly what they were made of. For now, though, she chose patience. After all, sometimes the best way to fight disrespect was to wait for the perfect moment to strike, not with anger, but with undeniable proof of strength. Months had passed since the day Max and Luna proved their worth to the Iron Vipers, and life in the small town had transformed in ways Emily never expected. The once hostile atmosphere gave way to a sense of unity, or at least mutual respect, between the locals and the soldiers stationed nearby. The diner where Emily often stopped for coffee became a place where townsfolk greeted her warmly, sometimes even asking about her dogs. Kids would run up to pet Max and Luna, giggling as the dogs playfully nudged them with wet noses. What started as a rocky relationship had blossomed into something meaningful, a bridge built on trust and admiration. Emily's reputation grew beyond just being the dog lady. She was now known as someone who didn't back down from challenges and led by example. Her story spread far beyond the outskirts of town, inspiring others to rethink stereotypes about women in uniform and the value of working animals. Even within her unit, fellow soldiers began seeking her advice on handling difficult situations, both with their own tasks and interpersonal conflicts. It wasn't just her skills they admired. It was her calm confidence and unwavering belief in teamwork. For Max and Luna, life continued much as it always had, filled with training sessions, patrols, and moments of well-deserved rest. But there was a noticeable shift in how people treated them too. Once dismissed as mere companions, they were now seen as elite partners capable of extraordinary feats. Soldiers and civilians alike marveled at their discipline and intelligence, often stopping Emily to ask how such incredible bonds were formed. Each time, she'd smile and say simply, "It's all about trust." One crisp autumn morning, Emily received an unexpected invitation to speak at a local community event honoring veterans and first responders. At first, she hesitated. Public speaking wasn't her strong suit, but eventually agreed, knowing it might help inspire others. Standing before a crowd of faces young and old, she shared her journey, the challenges she faced, the doubts she overcame, and the lessons she learned along the way. When she introduced Max and Luna, bringing them forward to demonstrate their skills, the audience erupted into applause. For many, seeing the trio work together was a powerful reminder that strength came in many forms, and that true courage wasn't about proving yourself to others, but staying true to your values. As winter approached, Emily reflected on how much had changed, not just in the town but within herself. She realized that while the confrontation with the Iron Vipers had been pivotal, it wasn't the defining moment of her journey. What truly mattered was the legacy she left behind. A community brought closer together, a newfound appreciation for the bond between humans and animals, and a quiet resilience that inspired those around her. Max and Luna remained her constant companions, their loyalty unshakable. Together, they represented something greater than any single victory. They embodied perseverance, partnership, and purpose. As Emily walked through the streets with her dogs trotting proudly beside her, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She hadn't set out to change anyone's mind or earn applause. She'd simply done what she believed was right. And in doing so, she'd reminded everyone that real strength wasn't about intimidation. It was about earning respect through action, patience, and heart. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the quiet outpost. Emily paused for a moment, watching Max and Luna sniff curiously at the fallen leaves swirling in the breeze. Life wasn't perfect, and challenges would undoubtedly arise again. But for now, she allowed herself to savor the peace, the hard-won harmony born from standing firm in the face of doubt. With a contented sigh, she called her dogs to her side, ready to face whatever lay ahead. After all, they'd already proven they could handle anything together. The day Emily had been dreading and secretly anticipating finally arrived. It started innocently enough, with her running errands in town after a morning training session. Max and Luna were by her side as usual, their presence drawing curious glances from passersby. But as she walked past the local mechanic shop, the familiar rumble of motorcycles filled the air. The Iron Vipers rolled in, parking their bikes in a loose semicircle around her. Razor led the pack, his scared face twisted into a smirk. "Well, well," he drawled, stepping off his bike. "Looks like we've got ourselves a little reunion." His tone was teasing, but there was an edge to it that made Emily's stomach tighten. She stopped walking and turned to face him, keeping her expression calm. Max and Luna stood alert beside her, their bodies tense, ready for whatever might come next. "You've been avoiding us, soldier girl," Razor continued, crossing his arms over his chest. "We thought maybe you didn't have the guts to face us again." His words were meant to provoke, but Emily didn't bite. Instead, she gave Max and Luna a subtle command to stay calm, placing a reassuring hand on each of their heads. "I don't have time for games," she replied evenly, meeting Razor's gaze without flinching. Her voice carried authority, the kind that came from years of leadership and discipline. "If you've got something to say, say it." Razor chuckled, clearly enjoying himself. "All right then, let's cut to the chase. We want to see what your dogs are really made of. All this talk about how great they are, it's starting to sound like a load of bull." He gestured to his crew, who nodded in agreement. "So here's the deal. Show us what they can do. Right now." Emily hesitated, weighing her options. On one hand, she knew better than to engage with these men. They thrived on chaos and conflict. But on the other hand, this could be her chance to shut them up once and for all. She glanced down at Max and Luna, who were watching her intently, waiting for her signal. They trusted her completely, and she owed it to them to trust herself too. "Fine," she said finally, her voice steady. "But if I do this, you'll leave me alone after. No more games, no more taunts. Deal?" Razor raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by her willingness to agree. After a moment, he shrugged. "Deal, but don't expect us to go easy on them." With that, Emily quickly set up a simple demonstration. She placed a small object, a rubber ball, at the far end of the street and instructed Max and Luna to retrieve it while navigating distractions created by the bikers. The challenge seemed straightforward, but Emily knew the real test would be whether her dogs could remain focused under pressure. As soon as she gave the command, the bikers sprang into action. They shouted loudly, clapped their hands, and threw empty soda cans toward the dogs, trying everything they could to break their concentration. One biker even revved his motorcycle engine, hoping the noise would spook them. But Max and Luna didn't falter. With perfect coordination, they worked together, weaving through the commotion as though it didn't exist. Max darted ahead, clearing obstacles with ease, while Luna stayed low, using her agility to slip past the distractions. Within minutes, Luna reached the ball and grabbed it firmly in her jaws before racing back to Emily. The entire crowd fell silent, stunned by the display. Even Razor looked impressed, though he tried to hide it behind a scowl. "Not bad," he muttered, folding his arms again. "But that was just a warm-up. Let's see how they handle something tougher." Emily smiled faintly, knowing her dogs were only getting started. If the bikers wanted a show, she'd give them one, but on her terms. And as Max and Luna stood proudly beside her, panting lightly from their efforts, she felt a surge of confidence. This wasn't just about proving a point anymore. It was about showing the world what true teamwork looked like, and reminding everyone that sometimes the quietest voices carried the most strength. The days turned into weeks, and Emily began to notice a pattern. Wherever she went in town, the Iron Vipers seemed to appear, their mocking comments growing louder and more frequent. At first, it was just harmless jeers. "Hey, dog lady, where's your leash?" Or "Think those pups can outrun our bikes." But soon, their taunts became more pointed, challenging her abilities as a handler and questioning the usefulness of her dogs. It wasn't just about teasing anymore. They were trying to provoke her, testing how far they could push before she snapped. Emily tried to brush it off, focusing on her duties and keeping Max and Luna sharp with rigorous training sessions. She knew better than to let their words get under her skin. Still, each encounter left a mark, not because of what they said, but because of the disrespect they showed toward her dogs. To Emily, Max and Luna weren't just tools for the job. They were living, breathing partners who deserved recognition for their hard work and loyalty. The biker's mockery felt like an insult not only to her, but also to them. One evening, after a long day at the base, Emily stopped by a gas station to fill up her truck. As she pumped fuel, Max and Luna sat patiently in the backseat, watching the world go by. Just as she was finishing, the roar of motorcycles filled the air. A group of 4 bikers pulled into the station, led by Razor himself. His scared face twisted into a sneer as he spotted Emily. "Well, if it isn't our favorite soldier," he said, leaning casually against his bike, still dragging those mutts around everywhere. Emily didn't respond, choosing instead to close the gas tank and head toward her vehicle. But Razor wasn't about to let her leave without stirring up trouble. He stepped closer, blocking her path. "You know, we've been wondering something," he continued, his tone dripping with mockery. "What makes you so special? You think hiding behind your dogs makes you tough. Bet they wouldn't last 5 seconds against real men." Max growled low in his throat, sensing the tension. Emily placed a calming hand on his chest, silently signaling him to stay put. She locked eyes with Razor, her expression calm but unwavering. "My dogs don't need to prove anything to you," she replied evenly. "But if you're looking for a show, maybe you should focus on proving something yourself." Her response caught Razor off guard. For a moment, He looked taken aback, unsure how to react. Then his smirk returned, wider this time. "Oh, we'll see about that," he said, stepping aside to let her pass. As Emily climbed into her truck and drove away, she could feel their stares burning into the rearview mirror. The confrontation had rattled her, not because she feared them, but because she realized they weren't going to stop until they got the reaction they wanted. Back at the base, Emily poured her frustration into training. If the bikers thought her dogs were nothing more than glorified pets, they were dead wrong, and she intended to make sure everyone knew it. She designed new drills to push Max and Luna even further, incorporating scenarios that tested their speed, agility, and teamwork. Obstacle courses became more complex, scent detection exercises grew increasingly difficult, and simulated combat situations pushed all three of them to their limits. Max and Luna thrived under the challenge. Their bond with Emily strengthened with every session, their movements fluid and instinctive as they anticipated her commands. Watching them work together was like watching poetry in motion. One would cover ground while the other sniffed out clues, both seamlessly switching roles when needed. They weren't just following orders. They were thinking, adapting, and excelling. Word of the escalating tension between Emily and the bikers spread through the town. Some locals whispered that the Iron Vipers had finally met their match, while others dismissed the rumors, claiming no one could stand up to Razor and his crew. Even within her own unit, whispers circulated about whether Emily would rise to the challenge or back down. But Emily didn't care about gossip. She wasn't doing this for anyone else. Not the townsfolk, not the soldiers, and certainly not the bikers. This was about pride, respect, and showing the world what true partnership looked like. And deep down, she knew that when the time came, Max and Luna would be ready to silence the doubters once and for all. The next morning, Emily woke up to a strange kind of quiet. The usual tension she felt when stepping into town was gone, replaced by something softer, almost unrecognizable. Word of what happened between her dogs and the Iron Vipers had spread like wildfire. By the time she walked into the diner for breakfast, whispers rippled through the room. Locals glanced at her, not with mockery or indifference, but with a newfound curiosity and respect. As she sat down in her usual corner with Max and Luna by her side, the waitress approached with a warm smile. "Morning, Sergeant," she said, setting a steaming cup of coffee on the table. "On the house today?" Emily blinked in surprise but managed a grateful nod. It wasn't just the free coffee that caught her off guard. It was the sincerity in the woman's voice. For weeks, most people had treated her like an outsider, someone who didn't belong. Now, they were looking at her differently. One man sitting nearby leaned over and said, "Heard about what your dogs did yesterday." That was something else. His tone was genuine, without a trace of sarcasm. Others chimed in, sharing stories of how they'd underestimated her before, but now saw things clearly. Even kids pressed their faces against the diner window, pointing excitedly at Max and Luna as if they were heroes straight out of a storybook. Later that day, as Emily ran errands around town, more people stopped to thank her, not just for standing up to the bikers, but for showing everyone what discipline and teamwork looked like. Some admitted they'd judged her unfairly because she worked with animals instead of carrying a weapon. "Guess we all learned something yesterday," one elderly shopkeeper said with a chuckle. "Never underestimate a soldier or her dogs." Even Razor made an appearance later that evening. He pulled up outside the base on his motorcycle, alone this time. Emily spotted him from a distance and braced herself for another confrontation. But when he stepped off his bike, his demeanor was different, softer, less confrontational. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice unusually hesitant. Emily nodded, motioning for him to follow her to a quieter spot near the training field. Max and Luna stayed close, their ears perked up, ready to act if needed. Razor cleared his throat, avoiding eye contact at first. "Look, I owe you an apology," he began, his words slow and deliberate. "I thought messing with you would be easy, but turns out I was wrong. Those dogs of yours, they're incredible." And so are you. He paused, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. I shouldn't have doubted you. None of us should have. Emily studied him carefully, searching for any hint of insincerity. Finding none, she replied evenly, apology accepted. But remember, it's not just about me. It's about respecting others, even when they're different from you. Razor nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. Yeah, I get it now. We'll leave you alone from here on out. No hard feelings. No hard feelings, Emily confirmed, extending her hand. Razor shook it firmly, then climbed back onto his bike and rode off. As she watched him disappear down the road, Emily felt a sense of closure wash over her. This wasn't just about winning a challenge. It was about changing perceptions and maybe even planting seeds of understanding. Over the following days, life in the small outpost began to feel lighter. The Iron Vipers kept their distance, sticking to their own business instead of stirring up trouble. Locals greeted Emily warmly whenever she passed by, some even bringing treats for Max and Luna. The transformation was subtle but undeniable, a reminder that actions often spoke louder than words. Sitting on the steps of her quarters one evening, Emily reflected on everything that had happened. She hadn't set out to prove anything to anyone, yet somehow she'd managed to earn the respect of an entire community. More importantly, she'd shown her dogs, and herself, that staying true to who you are was always worth it. Max rested his head on her knee, while Luna curled up beside them, content and calm. Together, they formed a bond stronger than any insult or challenge, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and purple, Emily knew one thing for certain. Sometimes, the greatest victories came not from fighting back, but from rising above. The sun was setting over the base, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, but Emily wasn't paying attention to the beauty around her. Her focus was entirely on Max and Luna as they raced through an obstacle course she had set up earlier that day. The course was designed to push them harder than ever before. Tall walls to scale, narrow planks to balance on, tunnels to crawl through, and hidden objects to retrieve. It wasn't just about physical strength. It was about mental sharpness, teamwork, and trust. Max leaped over a hurdle with ease, his powerful legs propelling him forward like a coiled spring. Behind him, Luna darted between poles, her sleek body weaving gracefully as if dancing to music only she could hear. Emily watched with pride, calling out commands in short, clear bursts. Left. Now right. Find it. Each word was met with instant obedience, their movements so synchronized it was almost eerie. This wasn't training anymore. It was art. But Emily wasn't doing this just for fun or even for routine practice. Every drill, every exercise, carried extra weight now. She imagined Razor's smug face whenever her dogs cleared another hurdle or executed a flawless maneuver. These sessions weren't just about preparing Max and Luna for missions. They were about proving something, both to herself and to anyone who doubted them. And deep down, she knew the biker's taunts had lit a fire inside her, fueling her determination to show what her team was truly capable of. As night fell, Emily decided to add one final challenge, a simulated combat scenario. She placed a decoy object, a small metal canister, at the far end of the field and instructed Max and Luna to retrieve it while navigating distractions. To make things more difficult, she enlisted two fellow soldiers to act as intruders, shouting and throwing harmless objects to disorient the dogs. If Max and Luna could stay focused despite the chaos, they'd prove their readiness for anything. The exercise began, and immediately the intruders started causing trouble. They banged metal buckets together, stomped loudly, and yelled nonsense to confuse the dogs. For a moment, it seemed like the noise might throw Max and Luna off track. But then something incredible happened. Instead of panicking, the pair communicated silently, their instincts taking over. Max took point, barking sharply to draw attention away from Luna, who slipped past unnoticed. While the intruders focused on Max's imposing presence, Luna located the canister and retrieved it without hesitation. When the drill ended, Emily couldn't help but smile. Max and Luna trotted back to her, tails wagging proudly, their teamwork flawless. The other soldiers clapped approvingly, impressed by the display. One of them joked, "If those bikers think they can mess with your dogs, they're in for a rude awakening." Emily chuckled but didn't respond. She didn't need to. Deep down, she already knew. Later that night, as she sat on the steps of her quarters, Emily reflected on how far they'd come. When she first arrived at the outpost, some people doubted her abilities, not just because she was a woman, but because she worked with animals instead of weapons. To many, dogs were seen as secondary, less important than human soldiers. But Emily had always believed differently. Max and Lola weren't just tools. They were intelligent, loyal, and brave. Together, the three of them formed a unit stronger than any weapon. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real test was yet to come. The Iron Vipers hadn't backed down, and Razor's mocking grin lingered in her mind like a shadow. Sooner or later, he'd pushed too far, and when that moment came, Emily wanted to be ready. Not for revenge or anger, but to remind everyone, including herself, that respect wasn't given freely. It had to be earned. With a deep breath, Emily stood up and called Max and Luna to her side. Their eager eyes met hers, filled with trust and anticipation. "Good job today," she said softly, scratching behind their ears. "But we're not done yet. Tomorrow, we'll train harder. We'll be faster, smarter, better." Her voice grew firmer, tinged with quiet resolve. "Because no matter what anyone says, we're going to show them exactly who we are." And with that, the trio headed inside, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Razor's words hung in the air, heavy with challenge. "Let's see how they handle something tougher," he repeated, his voice laced with skepticism. Emily could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This wasn't just another test. It was a turning point. If she backed down now, the bikers would never stop mocking her or underestimating her dogs. But if Max and Luna rose to the occasion, it could change everything. "All right," Emily said firmly, squaring her shoulders. "But this time, you're going to make it worth our while." Razor raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her sudden boldness. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if my dogs prove themselves, you leave us alone, for good. No more taunts, no more games. You keep your word this time." Her tone left no room for negotiation. Razor hesitated, clearly not expecting her to set terms, but after a moment he nodded. "Fine, and if they fail, you admit they're nothing special." Emily didn't hesitate. "Deal." With that, Razor turned to one of his toughest enforcers, a hulking man named Tank, and gestured for him to step forward. Tank cracked his knuckles, grinning menacingly as he approached. He was built like a wall, with arms thicker than most people's legs, and a glare that could intimidate even seasoned fighters. The crowd of bikers cheered him on, egging him to show the mutts who was boss. Emily studied Tank carefully, her mind racing. She knew this wasn't about brute strength. It was about strategy, teamwork, and trust. Turning to Max and Luna, she gave them a quick once-over, ensuring they were ready. Both dogs stood tall, their eyes locked onto Tank, their bodies coiled with anticipation. They weren't afraid. They were born for moments like this. "Here's the plan," Razor announced, folding his arms across his chest. "Tank stays put. Your dogs have to take him down without getting hurt themselves. If they can do that, we'll call it a win." He smirked, clearly convinced there was no way two dogs could outsmart someone like Tank. Emily nodded, keeping her expression calm. She knelt beside Max and Luna, speaking softly so only they could hear. "You've trained for this. Stay sharp, stay together, and remember, trust each other." Both dogs wagged their tails slightly, reassured by her confidence. Then, standing up, she gave the command. "Go." Max sprang into action first, circling around Tank to draw his attention. The big man laughed, waving his arms wildly as he tried to grab the agile German shepherd. Meanwhile, Luna slipped behind him unnoticed, darting in and out of his reach like a shadow. Tank spun around, confused and frustrated, unable to focus on both dogs at once. Seeing her opening, Luna darted forward, barking sharply to startle them. As Tank stumbled backward, off balance, Max moved in, positioning himself strategically to block any escape routes. Together, the dogs worked in perfect harmony, using their speed and intelligence to corner the much larger opponent. Within seconds, Tank found himself pinned against a nearby wall, unable to move without risking injury from the dog's calculated movements. The crowd of bikers fell silent, their jeers replaced by stunned disbelief. Even Razor looked taken aback, his usual cocky demeanor faltering. Tank held up his hands in surrender, his voice shaky as he admitted defeat. Okay. They got me. I'm done." Emily called Max and Luna back to her side, her heart swelling with pride. Both dogs trotted over, their tails wagging triumphantly as they returned to her. She knelt down, praising them warmly before standing up to face Razor and his crew. "Looks like we had a deal," she said, her voice steady and unyielding. Razor stared at her for a long moment, then let out a low whistle. "All right, soldier girl. You proved your point. Those dogs are impressive." It was the closest thing to respect Emily had ever heard from him. And though she didn't need validation from the likes of Razor, seeing the shift in his attitude felt like a small victory, not just for her, but for Max and Luna too. As the bikers mounted their motorcycles and roared away, Emily allowed herself a quiet smile. This wasn't about revenge or proving superiority. It was about earning respect and showing the world what true partnership looked like. And thanks to her incredible dogs, she'd done exactly that.